welcome to the 2026 season premiere of the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. On tonight's show, we'll welcome a legend in the fantasy sports industry, Ron Shandler. We'll talk about preparing for fantasy baseball drafts, precision versus imprecision, and how to handle risk. Plus, we'll go through the ATC undervalued catchers that you should consider. It's a jam-packed first episode of 2026 coming up next on Beat the Shift. And welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me, as always, is Ruvain Guy. What's going on, Ruvain?
Not much. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, and welcome back, everybody, for the premiere episode of our 2026 season of the Beat the Shift podcast. It's been a great off-season here. Us Mets fans are apparently waiting for smoke, according to our owner, Uncle Steve Cohen, as we're waiting for the Kyle Tucker decision. And Ruvain, the question to you is, who is going to be the first to break it?
I think it will be John Heyman, as long as it's not like another Arson Judge thing. But I think it'll be John Heyman because of the fact that he did break the Juan Soto thing, and he probably has some kind of connection with Boris.
Yeah, I'm going to go with John Heyman on that one. I think you're right on that. Are you hopeful that it's a Met, or you're not interested in $50 million a year?
Well, now that we don't have Alonso, now that we don't have Diaz, we need some more offense, I think. I think the pitching will be fine. And actually, I like a lot of the Mets' young pitchers. But they need a little bit more offense because I think I'd rather have him patrolling the outfield than Tyrone Taylor on a full-time basis.
My wife is devastated from the offseason. She called me up 2 consecutive days. The Mets didn't sign Diaz. The Mets didn't sign Alonso. She is absolutely furious. Plus, her favorite player in the Mets was Brandon Nimmo. So that didn't help. Not a good offseason for us in the Cohen
Transition
household.
year.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, we've got another Mets fan as our special guest today, FSWA Hall of Famer, the legendary Ron Shandler. Welcome to the show, Ron.
Hey, gentlemen, thanks for having me on. As a fellow Met fan, we're all just kind of waiting for the news here. It's been a long offseason, to tell you that.
Yeah, well, we can use, maybe it'll come in bunches. Maybe we'll sign Framber Valdez also. Who knows? You can only be hopeful as a Met fan. That's about all you can do, right?
Yeah, pretty much. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes, and for all we know, they'll pull something out of the hat there that we weren't expecting. Personally, I think I would rather have Cody Bellinger than Tucker, but who knows? We'll see what happens.
Well, let's see where it goes. Maybe the news will break on our episode. You never know. Ron, you've come out with a new book. I'm actually about 2/3 of the way through. It's called Fantasy Reconstructed. And maybe you want to tell the audience what it is about, who is the book for, and how did you come to write it?
Yeah, well, over the course of, about 40 years now that I've been writing about baseball analysis and fantasy baseball, I've always loved to think about different rules. I've always imagined how this game has shaped over time, and what might have happened if Dan Okrent had not invented rotisserie baseball when he did. Someone probably would have done it, but it might look very different than the way we play it today. So, I mean, at its core, this book is about the rules we play, the rules we use in our games. And what I do is I break down all the components of the game and look for ways to tweak things or even completely rebuild our formats to basically provide a better experience. So I'm looking at everything from the length and shape of the season to the size of the player pool and the structure of our rosters and different types of scoring and styles of draft and how we handle free agents and distribute prizes and keeper leagues and dynasty leagues. And it's all broken down. And then I re-engineer all these individual pieces into a bunch of new and innovative fantasy formats. So the book is for league commissioners and anyone who's ever wondered if there is a better way to play the game. And for those who think don't fix what ain't broke, I get that. But sometimes little rule tweaks can add some juice to a league. The book has hundreds of ideas, including over 250 that were crowdsourced. So including a couple of yours, Ariel's.
That's right.
So yeah, you'd be amazed at all the ways that people play this game. So it was a fascinating experience to write this. And yeah, it's a fun book. It's a fun read.
Yeah, those are definitely my favorite parts of the book. Is you call them
Yeah.
brainstorms in the book, where
Yes.
it's just reading what other people have done, and occasionally you come across a quirky idea. I don't know, penalties for players who are arrested, penalties for spilling a drink at the auction. Just really fun stuff. Just love it, and excited to read the rest of the book and to find out all the other tweaks that I can make, and some of them which I actually already do. So it's nice to hear that some of my ideas have passed.
Well, that's great. That's great. Yeah, and I've looked at some of these rules too, and I think in my home league here, I'm going to suggest some things. I'm in a keeper league here where we keep 8 players every year, and one of the rules that I just find intriguing because it really is an interesting exercise in game theory. I'm going to suggest that we cut back our keepers to 7 from 8. And for that 8th keeper, we get to choose an unprotected player on someone else's roster. So it's sort of like the Rule 5 draft. So, it changes the way you decide what players you're going to keep. And I think that's kind of innovative. So I'm going to suggest it in my home league, actually.
More strategy. There's more strategy
Yeah.
that goes with it. That's
Yeah.
the whole idea.
Yeah.
And where can we find it? Where can we get a copy of it?
Well, it's on Amazon.com. You can get a quicker copy, apparently, from the actual publisher, bookbaby.com, BOOKBABY. And you can get both the paperback and the ebook there.
Highly recommend it, and please go get your copy. I got one myself, and it's a great read. So there you go. Let's jump into our strategy section as we usually do on our show to start. We're going to have a lot of strategy this year, as always, on the Beat the Shift podcast. Let's talk about draft preparation as we're just approaching the draft season. And, from the legend, just want to get your general take. How does Ron Shandler prepare for a fantasy baseball draft?
Oh, Ariel, it's Babs all day, all night. It's Babs. The broad assessment balance sheet. It's my baby that I've been using to draft now almost 10 years, and I just love the way it kind of captures player performance in broad strokes without having to rely on individual player projections, which are just so variable. So yeah, with Babs, it slots every player into a profile based on their underlying skills metrics, and then it groups all those players with the same profile and ranks them by their market value, which ADP or average auction value. So then we can get a sense of which players have essentially the same skill but are being drafted in different places, and that's kind of where you find your profit, and it's just worked very well for me over time. So yeah, that's where it all starts with Babs.
And how has it changed over the past couple of years? Has it changed much?
Not really. On the risk side, and I know we'll get in talking about that in a second. We've made a couple of tweaks to how we assign value to the different type of risk variables, but for the most part, the system is pretty much the same as it was when it was first developed back in 2015.
All right, Ruvain, what do you do to prepare for a fantasy baseball draft or auction?
Well, I think preparation should start the second the previous season is over. I basically ignore the postseason because usually the postseason numbers are a little bit inflated for certain players, and it can affect their value. I just look at the value for the regular season because it's a 6-month season, and you get more data out of that than you would have just the World Series or the playoffs or everything like that. But when you start there, you follow apps like MLB Trade Rumor, where you hear about players coming over from different countries across the world. You hear about players who are being let go, who are available, who are non-rostered invitees. You want to hear everything like that. And I think you put that all together, then you get your projections. And you put together your projections, and then you see exactly who's going where, and we're going to talk about probably about the hot spots where we find those things. But there are also other things you can look for, like you can go look at depth charts. We went to First Pitch Arizona this past year. First Pitch Arizona is a great trip if you've never been there before. You get to see all the prospects and keep some of those prospects in mind because a lot of those who played at those games that we were at are going to be in the majors this year. So that's starting a prep already. Seeing if these players are ready for next year. See if they're actually going to be brought up for the team and see how they're going to work out. But I think the preparation should start for any fantasy baseball draft the second the last season ends.
All right, well, I take a little bit of a break as it's a long grind. My preparation starts when I start on the ATC projections, which I start in the end of December and early January. Once we get projections for everybody else, I make personal adjustments to some of the projections, usually in terms of playing time, if I think the projections could have gotten them wrong for some reason. And then I put it into an auction calculator and I get values. I then take the ADPs, AAVs, a sense of the market and where players are going in the market, put them side by side, and just as similar to what Ron said, I'm looking for pockets of value. I'm looking for a number of players who have similar position or similar profile in terms of stats and all have about the same costs and are bargains, and I find what's called the hot spots. The theory is if you want one player who's undervalued and it's just he's sitting somewhere, $15 player, who knows if you're going to get them, right? If somebody in your league loves him more, you won't get him. But if you find 4 similar players and you are indifferent to getting them because you evaluate it in the same way, the probability that you're going to get them at their ADP just skyrockets because there are 4 of them, right? In the numbers. And if you find those hot spots, that's where you know where to find them. And when you make your plan for, you know what, I'm going to get roughly a $5 corner infielder, or, there's some value in the middle infield at $15, you put together a basic plan of where you think you can get the most value. It doesn't always go like that, but it gives you a good roadmap of how to do it. And that's how I prepare for a fantasy baseball draft. Anything else to add, Ron?
It sounds like you're doing it very similarly to the way Babs does it now. It's you call it pockets. I call it asset groups. Basically, it's the same thing. Looking for those spots in the draft where there are several players of similar value that the market sees differently, and really it's all about this game is really all about real value versus market value, and that's where you find your profit and loss. So yeah, that's great.
I don't think we differ in terms of doing that kind of prep, in terms of values versus market. And I think market, we pretty much do the same thing. I think the values are where we might differ, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. Now, I do want to ask a little bit more about Babs, because one thing that I love about it is that it's not just value, it's value plus risk. So maybe you could just tell the audience, are you looking to get only a certain amount of risk on the team? Are you looking at different risk factors and saying, I don't want too many injury guys, too many inexperienced guys? What are your risk characteristics? Like, how does the risk part of it work?
Okay, well, Babs includes a risk budget, in fact. And what we do is we give a point score to every risk category. So, for instance, injury risk is assigned a score of 5 or 3 or 1, depending upon the severity of the risk. And we look at skills risk and experience risk. They're done likewise. And some minor risks like, players' age or a new team or ballpark changes, things like that. And the risk scores, we have higher risk scores for players who are ranked in the top 60 or the $20 players, because those players are tougher to replace. So we give them a higher risk score. Then we just add up all the points. And we have benchmark goals that are personal to how you want to build your roster. So for us, the least risky rosters are those who total under 30 points. And once you get over 50 points, you can expect results to become more variable, plus or minus. But it's a personal decision, how much risk you want to take on. And it's a different decision based on whether you're in a redraft league or a keeper league, for instance. So I think risk is a very personal decision you make based upon how you want to build your roster.
So do you relate bargains to risk? So, for example, like the way you described it, you're just counting the amount of risk. For me, though, I would say that, if I'm going to draft Troy Tulowitzki, Trevor Story, one of those, injury risk guys, and, they're a $4 bargain, okay, I guess we can go with that. But if I wanted to draft, in addition, Byron Buxton, well, I'm okay with that, but now I need a bigger bargain to accumulate more risk. Like I'm not looking at total risk on the team. I'm looking at total risk per amount of bargain I'm getting on that. Do you have any of that sense?
Well, to be honest with you, Ariel, I have trouble with the whole idea of bargains, because the concept of bargains assumes that we even know what a player's true value is, and I really don't think we do. So I just look at risk individually as a separate type of an isolated element of each player's profile. And that's why, I'll try to build as much asset value into the skills side of the balance sheet. But when it comes to risk, I'll set my budget, whether it's 30 points, 40 points, 50 points, whatever it is. And I know if I'm drafting a Byron Buxton, then I've got to get, a low risk player like a Matt Olson or someone like that who I know is going to give me 600-700 plate appearances. And it's just a balancing act to try to make sure that you keep under the risk budget that you've set.
Over under 100 IL days for Byron Buxton. What do you take?
Uh, it's funny you say that. Byron Buxton is a perennial name on the introduction I do at First Pitch Arizona every year, and the question is always, how many lifetime IL days does Byron Buxton have? And I make people guess, and I believe now it's over 500, but it's last year was a great year. I mean, he actually stayed on the field and put up a very productive season, but can he do that 2 years in a row? I think back to a player like Paul Molitor, who was very injury prone early in his career, and then through his 30s, he was like a stalwart. So I'm not going to put it past the possibility that Buxton could become a stable commodity moving forward. Who knows?
All right, Ruvain, how do you handle risk?
Oh, well, for risk, first of all, it depends what type of risk you're talking about. You're talking about injury risk. When you're first drafting your team, you have to understand that if you have too many, risk factors to start with, and you don't have a active roster, or you're not going to have an active roster, then you obviously have an issue. But the issue that I run into is that, you're going to take a guy who says, okay, listen, this guy's hurt to start the year. We know he's going to start the year in IL. Let's say a Garrett Cole type thing. You know he's going to start the year in the IL, or a Carlos Rodon. You know he's going to start the year in the IL. You know he's not going to give you the full value that you're going to get, and you have to make sure you plan accordingly. But if you use that risk, then you're taking up a roster spot, and I think it's an added risk. And I try to avoid risk at the auction table if I can. Every player has risk. If you have a roster, I believe maybe half your players will end up on the aisle at some point, or will miss some time at some point. So there's risk with everybody. But the fact that you don't have any built-in injury risk to begin with, I'm looking at that. Number two, you're looking for underperformance risk. Who's going to underperform? The players who underperformed last year, are they going to have bounce back years? Are you going to bet on a bounce back player? I don't know if I'm going to do that all the time, because you don't know how they're going to bounce back. You don't know if they're going to bounce back. You don't know if they're playing with an injury. You don't know if they're playing, healthy. You don't know what's going on. And then there's also this prospect risk. How is a prospect going to do? How is a prospect going to do when he first comes up? Is he going to hit the floor running, or is he going to hit a wall and be sent down? You don't know how that's going to work out. But all these things have to play into your mind when you're talking about risk, because these all are different types of risks, but they all factor into your team. So you can't have so much of everything. You can have a little here, little there, but you have to have no worries that it's going to drag you down. So you have to have a good base to be able to take on a good amount of risk.
I mean, a lot of that is built into projections, in terms of playing time, and for prospects, the underperformance is built into their projection, which is tempered, tempered, I should say. Ron, do you have like a don't draft list, or that you will avoid certain players, or are you good with taking anybody at any price?
I think everybody has a price. I don't think I have a no draft list. I think it depends upon the state of at the point of the draft. If it's at a point of the draft and I've already accumulated a fair amount of risk and I'm getting close to my budget, there are certain players obviously I have to stay away from, because then I start exceeding my risk budget. So, from that perspective, I used to have what you might call an only draft from this list, which I used to do a thing called total control drafting, where you basically created an optimal draft pool and just got those players. So, I mean, from that perspective, that optimal draft pool is usually a group of players who are mostly low risk, with a few educated risks thrown in there. But I think it really depends upon the draft, and I would never say never for any player unless it really was something that was going to hurt my roster.
Yeah, I mean, usually if you don't like a player, or you think a player is not worth it, I just drop the value of the auction price, right? And then you bid off of that. I need a bigger bargain, or I should say bigger perceived bargain, in order to get that player. I think the only profile that I really don't like is players who are currently injured, especially pitchers that you don't know, they hurt their shoulder, they hurt their forearm. Like when you see a player has a hurt forearm, I don't like drafting them. I mean, you just don't know, and it's a binary risk. Are they going to make it? Are they not? Sure, if he's healthy and it's just a lapse, then you're going to get a great bargain. But the player can also go to zero. I just don't like that type of risk, and that binary risk is usually not priced correctly at an auction. All right. So I do want to talk about, I want to push back a little bit about, I know you mentioned just before that, you can't really project the player. There's so many variability, and I sort of disagree with that. I mean, I'm a big fan of yours, but I cannot come around to the imprecision as well. You just can't project it with a high degree of certainty. So, we need more imprecision in evaluating than precision. I think that's wrong. I mean, I think you can project players with precision. I think ATC does a very good job of it, or the best job that we've seen out there. But what there is understanding that the player comes with volatility around it. The uncertainty of what a player will do in a certain year comes from both what's called process risk and parameter risk. Process risk is just the randomness of the 162 games, given a player's true talent, right? If a player is a 25-homer player, he can get 30 homers or he can get 20 homers. Those are within the outcomes just from the fact that there's 162 games. If he played 1,000,000 games, he would get 25 on average. Then there's parameter risk, which is the uncertainty of what the true talent really is. Process risk is measurable, and we can do it because we have a lot of historical data on the variability around players. The parameter risk, that is harder to peg down, but you can try. And ATC actually does a really good job of it. Because ATC comes from a lot of different projection viewpoints plus historical data, you can see the variability around projections, and it tightens up the parameter risk. And you can quantify it. I mean, ATC has the variability metrics, volatility and skew, so you can see just how variable and how skewed left or right a player is. And then it's the question of knowing what to do with the volatility. Do you ding a player $2? Do you raise them three players? So my question to you sort of is, at the end of the day, when you come to an auction and Pete Alonso says 23, you have to know how to pull the trigger and say, should I bid 24? Like, how does that go for you if you're not so precise on projections to say, yep, I'm going to bid 24?
Well, I get a sense of where his skills bucket is within the marketplace, and I see whether that 23 is comparable to other players in that same bucket. Typically in a draft, I will sit back for a while and see how players are being priced, so I know how to go in when secondary players within the same skills bucket are thrown out there. But I don't have a specific price for any player. I play off the marketplace. The ADPs, the AVs, they tell me roughly what my competition thinks a player should cost, and my decision is whether I think it's too much or too little, based on how comparable players in each skill bucket is being purchased. So, I don't go in thinking a guy is a $25 player. And, I'm going to give you an analogy here. It's like going into a Capital Grille restaurant and saying, I want to pay $15 for the 8-ounce steak because that very same steak is going for $15 at Texas Roadhouse. Capital Grille says, no, that steak's going to cost you $50, whether you pay it or not. If you don't want to pay it, you're going to settle for the $20 hamburger. And what Babs does, it says it looks and finds those hamburgers that will taste just as good as that steak. It might cost me $15, it might cost me $25, but it's not going to cost me $50 if I don't want to pay that much. And then it's just a matter of deciding, looking at the tenor and the tempo of the auction and the individual bidding, and seeing whether I need to go an extra buck on a player, because I'm looking at my competition, I'm looking at the table, and I'm deciding this guy needs this player. He's going to go an extra buck. Do I want to go an extra buck? And it's really just playing off the marketplace. So yeah, that's kind of how I do it.
Any questions, Ruve?
No, I like this back and forth. I'm learning from it. That's all.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I'd say is that it sounds like in an auction you're waiting a little bit. Let's say a closer comes out. Edwin Diaz comes out, 21, 23. It sounds like you're waiting to see whether that one's priced. Like I play it differently. I have a number in mind that I think initially, because I've looked at the AAVs, and I'm prepared to go to a certain number. If the number goes higher, so let's say I think that Diaz is worth $23 and I think the AAV is 22, right? So I'm going to go and I'm going to probably say, I'm going to bid 22 because I think that that's a great price for the AAV because closers are usually hard to get. If the number goes to 25, I drop out and I write on my sheet +2 because now I see that I've learned the economics of the room was actually $2 more for closers than I thought. So I won't
Absolutely.
bid.
Yeah.
I won't bid. I won't bid on Diaz. I won't get that. But then on the next closer, I'll know that if I want a closer, my AAVs are off by $2. So if Josh Hader, it says $20, I'm going to bid $20 as my price, and the AAV is 18. I know that the AAV is really 20. So I got to make a snap decision whether that's a good relative bargain to Diaz. And at 20 it was because Diaz went $2 over. If I do 20, then it makes sense. Right? So I'm not waiting back to see the market.
You're
coming
setting
in
the
with
market.
a guess.
You're trying to set the market in a certain
both.
sense. That's what you're trying
I'm
to do.
coming in with a guess at what the market prices are. If I like it, I bid right away and buy it. If I don't, because I think the market is higher, I note it and use that information to change all my bids going further because of the economics of the room.
Let me tell you, that's a perfect example, and I could show you how I would approach it. Okay, Diaz goes out. Okay, and I take a look at my BABS spreadsheet, and I take a look that Diaz is in the absolute same skills bucket as Andres Munoz and Joan Duran, Cade Smith, David Bednar, Josh Hader. They're all in the same skills bucket. And that's the order of their ADPs at the moment. So if Diaz is the first one out, I don't need to go after him. I can watch to see what his price is. I don't need to set the market. I can see where the market stops, and I know that I can get any four of those other closers for a price at or below what Diaz goes for. And that's the way I would approach it.
Okay.
But wouldn't the issue be that if you do that, then the next slide comes out and you say, oh wait, I still have people in the bucket. Next slide comes out, and then as the bucket empties, sometimes those prices tend to go up because you're running out of people in the bucket.
Well, you have to know when to jump in. Absolutely. Okay, that's absolutely, you need to know when to jump in. But yeah, that's the way you do it. I wouldn't wait until four of them are out, knowing I only have two more left. I would probably get probably the third one out. The third one out is probably when I would try to go after.
So if you have 5 guys similarly skilled, you would theoretically want the cheapest market value and buy the cheapest one of them. Wouldn't that be
If I
true?
could. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely, if I could.
So wouldn't you constantly be throwing out, or not constantly, but more often than not, be throwing out the lowest guy in the tier? So if David Bednar, if you looked at the AAVs, right, that FBC publishes AAVs, and David Bednar is going the lowest of them, wouldn't it be good more than often than not when it comes to your nomination to say, David Bednar, let me just pick that guy, get my closer anyways, because it's going to be the cheapest one?
That's a tactical approach. Certainly, I could do that and see if he comes in at at under the value that Diaz goes for. But I don't have to. I mean, I can wait a few players and then jump in, or I can throw out the lowest priced one in that group and see if I can get him under that price. Sure. I mean, that's just a tactical decision, really.
Right. I know I didn't put it in the rundown, but I'm curious, like what do you decide when you're throwing out your player nominations? Like, how do you decide who to put out?
Well, if it's early in the draft, I'm going to throw out some of the guys at the top of these skills buckets to see exactly where they're going to go for. I want the top closer to see how he's going to be priced. I want the top speed guy to see how he's going to be priced. The top power guys, because that's what's going to set the benchmark for the draft going forward. I mean, it's not perfect, obviously. There's always one guy who's got this favorite and he's going to go to the wall for. But for the most part, it sets a rough benchmark that you can play off of.
Because I think we do something different. I think we either nominate players who we want, who we think we can get early. That's a big part of our plan. Or I would almost never nominate a guy at the top of the tier. I'd rather nominate some guy, number 3 in the tier. This way, it artificially makes the top ones go even higher, and we extract more value out. Right? If you throw out the top one, I think he would have gone higher if I threw out the third one, and now there's a demand for top tier guys.
I would worry about that, to be honest, because if I threw out the third guy and he went for a higher average value than who I have listed as the top guy, that kind of throws everything off. I think I need to set the upper benchmark so I know where to play off of it. Yeah.
Right, right. You're doing such a different strategy than we are because you're buying pretty much the lowest value given a certain tier of skill sets. You're not, as precise with the numbers as we are. I'm looking at the biggest bargain on an individual player basis. You're not, so that makes sense that you wouldn't do the same tactic as me for nominations. Very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. So in terms of ADPs, well, let's talk a little bit about draft now. We talked a little bit about auctions before, but um, there's this thing that comes up that's called ADP chicken, where you have a guy that you think is much more valuable, but the ADP says it's lower. Maybe you're in the 8th round and the ADPs indicate he's 12th round. When do you take a stab at taking your actual player that you like, even though it's the ADP is lower?
Well, okay. Back in 2018, 2019, I did some research on how well our ADPs performed against reality. And it showed that basically two-thirds of our picks in fantasy drafts were basically busts, and fully 25% were complete disasters in which they basically weren't even the draftable population. So I don't pin a lot of value into individual ADPs per se. So I guess I don't play ADP chicken basically. I accept the fact that we really don't know what a player will earn, so we should just pay what we think he's worth. So I'll draft a player probably up to maybe 2 rounds ahead of his ADP, especially once we hit around round 8 or so when things get really muddled, because at that point, the ADP error bar becomes ridiculously wide. Um, and honestly, yeah, that's kind of the way I would do it. So I'd go probably no more than about 2 rounds ahead of my 2 rounds ahead of where the ADP is, because I think the values are that variable.
Okay, Ruven, well, what do you do?
Well, I actually look at the construct of the team because that plays a big deal in it. Like, say you're in round 8 and you need stolen bases for somewhere. You may jump a guy an extra round or two because you don't want to wait because you're nervous you're not going to get that stolen base guy or you're not going to get that power guy. So I think it's perfectly fine to jump every once in a while. But if you start seeing, wait, I like this player, I have to jump him, then you're going to start running into trouble because you're going to leave a lot of draft capital on the table. You're going to be, you're going to take someone and you're going to say, oh, wait, and I'm looking at the ADP, it should be okay, it should be fine. But in your league, it's different. Every league is different, and you can't go by that. I think it's very hard to play ADP chicken. It's very nerve wracking, and you have to look at the other teams, see what they're doing, see how their roster is constructed, and see if you playing chicken is not being you're not over and analyzing everything too much. But at the same point, don't be afraid to be the first one to draft a closer. Don't be afraid to be the one to draft a top catcher, except for the first one in this year. That's what I think, but that's another thing. Don't be afraid to be the first to be to nominate in that tier or the stolen base tier or whatever it may be. Just because if you do, you're going to see all of a sudden there'll be a whole run and then you'll miss out on all of them.
Yeah, I mean, not to be a cop out answer, but it really depends on the situation, how far down in the draft you are, how much your values are. And of course, it's not just one player. There's more than one player that you want to take at a certain time, right? It depends what you have to accomplish. But I think that you both have the right idea. A couple of rounds. You don't want to go, you don't want to pick a 5th round player in the 2nd round just because your values say it. But, if it gets with a round or two, obviously, and it depends on the situation.
Hey, Ruvain, you said something that I just want to hop on for just a second. And let me ask you, both of you. I mean, once you get into, say, rounds 8 or 10, how much do you look at the other rosters to plan ahead for your future picks? I'm just curious.
It depends. Slow draft, I do it all the time. I looking to see, did they just pick a pitcher? How many pitchers do they have? Do I need to? Can I wait and get a pitcher because everyone took pitchers? Do they have closers? Do they have this? Do that? So I actually look at it in a slow draft. I look at it a lot. It's a lot harder to do it in the snake draft when you're doing it. Like a minute, 2 minutes to do something like that. So it's a little bit harder to do that. But I still try to look at it and I look at the board quickly because usually it has some time for it to get back to you. So I do look at it because it does play a big role in who I'm going to pick next. I have a list. Okay, I need this. I have these players that I want to get. Are they going to make it back to me? Well, let's see. Do other players, other competitors need this? And it does for me. I actually look at it, and it does take a little extra time, but I think it was worth it.
Yeah, in a slow draft you can do that. I think about the
Yes.
live drafts and it's like almost impossible.
It's very hard to do that. Very
Yeah,
hard.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, the live drafts, you just have so little time. At the very end, I would think. I think it also depends how close you are to the wheels and the turns. If you've got, if you're in the 14th spot out of 15, maybe you look at the 15th guy a little bit more carefully to know, should I put this guy or this guy because that guy doesn't need it. If you're in the middle, which I typically am when I draft, I don't do that in drafts at all, pretty much. Maybe at the very end.
Actually, let me amend that. If you're doing a 15-team draft, you're doing NFBC, you do or anything, you do a whole. What's you do? You do an auction. You finish the auction, and there's a snake draft after. That's when you should definitely look at the rosters and see where you're drafting and who's going to be in front of you, and if they have certain categories or types of pitchers like possible relief closers or stuff like that. That's when you should definitely look at that, because that's when you can actually use your knowledge to pick the player and not have to worry about playing chicken.
Yep, that's a great point.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
All right. It's also our catcher preview episode. Now, what we do here on the Beat the Shift podcast is we don't go through the entire catcher pool or any player pool and say our top four are this and that's not really helpful to us. But what we do is we take a look and we see which players are currently a perceived value by the ATC projections, and then we don't just blindly pick them and say, oh, pick this guy. We do a deep dive, which is what we do on the show, and we see whether we agree with the perceived bargain or not. But to set it up, we do want to talk a little bit about the player pool, because I think it's very important to know how the lay of the land is by each position. This is what I see, and you guys can comment, but just to give you a little bit of a thing, with catchers, it's a different type of value that you need to account for than a regular other position player. Second baseman, third baseman, outfielders, the bottom of the pool is pretty much interchangeable. Like maybe this was different 10 years ago, but the worst second baseman is equivalent roughly to the worst outfielder to the worst third baseman. You don't really need a positional adjustment, but for catcher you do. If you just look at the pure stats, you would almost never want to take a catcher, right? Especially in a two-catcher league. Why would you? They're just crappy. But because you have to roster two catchers in a two-catcher league, you're not paying for stats. You're paying for the privilege of not rostering the 30th worst catcher, right? You're paying for marginal stats. So it does need a catcher bump. I'm wondering, before we talk about the lay of the land, Ron, what do you do to price catchers? Are you doing some sort of replacement level bump? It's going to add $5. How does that work for you?
I traditionally have always tried to stay in the middle of the pool. I mean, I don't draft the top catchers. I try desperately to stay away from the end game catchers. I fish in the middle of the pool because that seems to be the spot where if you're going to find profit at all, that's where you're going to find it. So yeah, that's basically my underlying approach.
Okay. So what I do, because obviously I'm very specific on values, is the replacement level is much lower, and what I use is I look at what happened in the past. I don't look at projections. I look at historical catchers. How different is the 30th catcher to the 30th third baseman, and I use that bump or that difference, and I add it to all the catchers, and that sort of does that. But in terms of the catcher player pool, this is what I see this year, and every year it could be different. I think that the bottom of the pool, the very bottom, really, they would be negative values if not for the bump, is really below catcher 24. I think that catchers this year are really flat. All of the number two catchers, pretty much I have is worth $6 or less. So that tells you for your second catcher, you can actually really spend really low. Like you can buy a $2-3 catcher and walk away with like the 16th best catcher. There's not a big enough price difference within the whole second catcher tier that you can actually just spend a little bit of money and actually get a much, much better catcher for it. At the top, I see that other than Cal Raleigh, we do have a more compressed range. In terms of the values that I'm getting so far with ATC preliminary projections. Cal Raleigh is like a $30 player. But then you get like Contreras and Ben Rice and Shea Langolier. They're all like $20. They all go down to maybe 15. So it's actually really flat. You don't have to pay up for the second best catcher. You want a good bargain because I think, as you would say, Ron, that all the skill levels are really similar, I think, or at least value-wise I have them similar, that you can just pay what the biggest bargain in the market is, and you can get a low-end number one catcher, and that will be a much better value than overpaying for like the third best catcher. Do you guys agree on that this year?
Yeah, it is really bunched up in the middle. You look at the ADPs here, and you've got like a dozen catchers between ADP 54 and 100. So in that 50 spot range, you've got a whole bunch of catchers, and it is very flat. And from a Babs perspective, they're really nicely bunched as well. You've got a group here with Langoliers, Sal Perez, Ben Rice, Will Smith, all in one group. I've got William Contreras, Gabriel Moreno, Ivan Herrera in a group. They're nicely bunched, so it would be easy to pick off the lowest ADP for these guys and get a decent value. So yeah. Mm-hmm.
Definitely the funniest auction nomination of a catcher I've heard in recent years was Alex Chamberlain at Tout Wars a couple years ago. He nominates Shea Lingerie for like $5. I thought that was hilarious. Anyways, before we go on, we've got our very first Injury Gurus trivia of the week.
So in looking at the catcher player pool, I did a little research and trying to figure out how good these catchers are at the top. So my trivia question for the week is, over the last 3 seasons, there have been 7 catchers who have finished in the top 300 hitters in a 5x5 league. Who are they?
Last 3 years?
Last 3 years, because you want some stability, so last 3 years.
JT Realmuto.
Realmuto's in there. He's actually the last one, number 7.
I'm going to go with
Sal
Cal
Perez.
Raleigh. Cal Raleigh.
Cal Raleigh is there. Sal Perez is there.
Will Smith.
Will Smith is there.
Yanier Diaz, did he have a really good year?
Yanier Diaz is there.
William Contreras.
William Contreras. And there's one more that we mentioned earlier.
Probably have to go back a couple years.
I don't know if you did, but Shea Langoliers, I don't know if you mentioned him. He's also on the list.
Okay.
So those are 7, and if you look at the player pool, at the top of the 12 top that are 12, 13 that are top catchers, all of them are there. So you'd have some really good stability that's there. So even if you have to pay a little bit more for those top guys, it's much better to get one of those guys than to be stuck with the bottom 2. And I think that it shows a big lay of the land that if these 7 guys are still in that top level of the catchers, and they've done it the last 3 years. I mean, the only player I'd really be maybe a little bit concerned with is Sal Perez because of his age, but otherwise all these guys are still in their prime, so there's really no reason to have to worry about even overpaying a little bit for those top catchers just because you have that little comfort level that they've done over the last 3 years.
That's great information, yeah.
So before we talk about individual perceived bargains from ATC, I want to get your take on this, Ron. Cal Raleigh is going right now, early second round, like the 4th pick in the second round in a 15-team NFBC draft. Are you taking that? What would be your price point to take Cal Raleigh this year?
Okay. Yeah. I really hate recency bias, and that is really driving up his price. Cal Raleigh will not be on any of my teams this year. I know. I just will not pay that value for him. See, my problem is that everyone sees him as if last year should be a legitimate point of reference, and I think last year needs to be treated as an outlier. So rather than taking 2025 and saying, well, what would his numbers be if we discount that by like 20%, I'd rather take his previous history and say, well, what if we use 2025 as just an indicator that he's taken a step up from history? And then instead of all these 48 home run projections, I see him more as like a 38, 40 home run hitter. Yeah, Baseball HQ currently has him at 40 home runs with a 232 average, and I like that projection. I would bet on that, and that's not a second round player to me.
I'm not having any, just like Ron, I'm not having any shares of him this year. Just look last year. William Contreras, he was going at the end of the second round last year. I bet you the people who drafted him at the end of the second round are not drafting Cal Raleigh in the second round this year. It's the same reason. It's the recency bias. He had a career year. He's not going to repeat that. I can almost take that to the bank. If he repeats that, then I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do, but I don't think he's going to repeat it because it's so unlikely for a catcher who goes through the wear and tear of a regular season and plays so many games behind the plate that it's going to happen again. So maybe if he falls to the end of the third round, beginning of the fourth round, I could see about taking him. But anything else, I'm not even touching him.
So last year, catchers drafted in the round second through fourth. William Contreras, Yainer Diaz, Adley Rutschman, those were all major losses. Catchers that were taken like fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth round: Cal Raleigh, Salvador Perez, Will Smith, Shea Langoliers. Those are all either big gains or par value, right? I think you're much better off for the values for catchers in that range. I think the issue for me is drafting a catcher that high. There's tremendous profile risk. Profile risk is the risk that a loss to him, either because of injury or underperformance, has an outsized effect on your entire fantasy roster, right?
I have, sorry to interrupt, but there is breaking news. Kyle Tucker has signed with the team. According to Jeff Passan, he has signed with the LA Dodgers.
Oh, boy, really?
Oh, no.
Are you serious?
I am serious. Jeff Passan, this was tweeted out about a minute ago. He signed with the LA Dodgers. So no to the Mets, no to the Toronto Blue Jays, and there's probably going to be a work stoppage at the end of this year.
Wow.
Okay. Well, that put the damper on the evening here.
Sorry about that, but I had to break in with that. I'm sorry.
All right. Well, we'll commiserate later.
Well, immediate reaction. What do you do with this? Do you change his Ron? Do you change his value at all because he's going to the Dodgers, or you just keep him where he is?
Yeah, I'd probably keep him where he is. That's not going to really change all that much. Dodger Stadium, maybe a little bit different from Wrigley, but I probably wouldn't change all that much.
I think I would buy Will Smith more now. More RBIs and runs. Now you got hitting in front of you. You've got Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, and Kyle Tucker. Oh, dear Lord.
So why don't they have an All-Star game, the Dodgers versus everybody else? Maybe that'll work. I don't know. Sorry
all right. I guess we'll have to count on Cody Bellinger for us Mets fans.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few commodities left that we can go after. Jeez.
Should have taken him earlier. The $50 million offer should have been a couple of weeks ago. Anyways, back to catchers. So my point here is Cal Raleigh, the profile risk that if Cal Raleigh goes down, that's really, really bad for your team. And if he underperforms, either way, I'm just not willing to take that risk. Projections are going to have him somewhere ranked like number 20 overall, but I cannot draft him. I would say I would draft him in the middle of the third round. To me, maybe even the top of the third round. That would be interesting to me, but nowhere near where he's going to go. Okay. ATC undervalued players, and just to preface it, you might hear me talking about a value. My values are NFBC format, 15-team 5x5. The reason I do that is I have to pick some number to give and to be consistent, and that's a popular format out there for a lot of people who listen. So apologize if you play in a 10-team with 3 outfielders only, but, we're going to recite the NFBC format. AAV numbers, I recite them as ADP dollars. When I say he's going for X, it's where I take the ADP and I convert it to an auction value equivalent just to be on the same basis as me. Number 1, undervalued player, Salvador Perez. All right, so Ron, do you think Salvador Perez, who comes out as about a $5 bargain according to ATC, which is pretty decent, he's going for about $15, which is about 7th round, and I have him worth, $20, $21. Is that somebody who interests you?
Yes, as a matter of fact, he does. Babb sees him in the same, basically the same skill set as Shea Langeliers and Ben Rice, who are going, 50 players ahead of him. So, yeah, definitely, definitely a bargain there.
Okay, Ruven?
Well, I like Sal Perez even at his advanced age. He played 155 games last year, but only 92 at catcher, which means the Royals are protecting him. He played a couple games at DH. He played at first base, and there's really no DH locked in for the Royals. So Sal Perez will get a lot of DH time. He's not going to play that much at first because obviously Vinny P is there. But he's age 36. His average was down a little bit due to a poor BABIP over the last year. He had a 250 BABIP, but according to Statcast, he had his most hard hit balls last year since 2021 and the second highest of his career. So if you can get him at a value, he's definitely a guy to go after.
All right, so here's what my take on Salvador Perez. We know what his skills level is. It's pretty much consistent. It's a near $30 home run player, maybe a little bit lower. He's a little bit older now, 25 to 30 homers, but he's going to get plenty of playing time. I mean, he plays first base, also DH. They're going to give him at bats, and he's going to bat like fourth or fifth. So he can hit 25 homers, 240 average, and even if he does that, which is a little bit of a decline, that still earns more than his draft price. So to me, it's pretty much just injury risk, which is pretty much the same for anyone. I'm completely comfortable in taking him at that price. Next one is Will Smith, whose value just went up $1 or $2 for an extra 5 RBIs, right? This guy, Will Smith, and I'll go to Ruve next, but here's his fantasy value for the last 6 years. $18, 20, 21, 18, 17, 16. I think I know what he is, and his ADP this year is in the 8th round, which is an auction equivalent of 14. They're batting him cleanup. He's going to have a ton of RBIs. He's not going to hit 296 again, but 260, 20-ish homers sounds about right. Is what he's been usually doing. The only thing I worry about are the Dodgers going to be cautious with him. They've got a loaded lineup. They don't have to play him that much down the stretch. We know he breaks down in the second half a little bit. They want to keep him fresh for the playoffs. So my only worry is less at-bats. But for the time that he's in, he's superb, and I'm willing to draft him as my number one. Ruvain?
Yeah, so he only played 110 games last year, which is the lowest he's had for his career in a full season. But last year he had career highs for a full season in hard hit percentage, barrel percentage, and average exit velo. So, but all those things together, if he plays more than 110 games, if he plays 120 games, that alone, that could get you to become a top 5 catcher in baseball. So I think, especially now, he's in a deeper lineup. I don't think he's going to be batting 4th anymore. He may be batting 5th, which may even get him more RBIs, like we just mentioned. So I think he's a guy, as long as he stays on the field and the Dodgers keep him healthy, which they will, then I think he's definitely worth a bargain.
All right, what say you, Ron?
Yeah, no, I agree. I definitely see him as a bargain. And we talked about Perez, but Smith is in that same group as well with Langios and Rice. So, he's also about 50 players behind those two top in that category. So, definitely somebody I would go after.
Okay, the next player is Alejandro Kirk of the Blue Jays. He could have been helped out by Kyle Tucker, but he signed with the Dodgers. Ron, what's your take on Kirk for this year?
Yeah, not a huge fan here. I think looking at last year's numbers, it was the first time he'd put up 500 plate appearances in 4 years. So, the health has always been a concern. I don't think that we can count on the number of plate appearances he put up last year, as well as that batting average is about 20, 25 points higher than I think last year was a bit of an outlier. Not a step up or anything like that. His batting average dropped from 311 in the first half to 245 in the second. So he's, like most catchers, tends to fade down the stretch. So not as huge of a fan on him.
Okay, what about you, Ruvain?
I'm actually pretty high on him because of the fact if he gets playing time, if he's healthy, and that's the whole thing you mentioned about the at bats. Whenever he has more than 450 at bats, he happens to do well that in the years that he does that. Well, that means he's healthy. That's the main thing. He ranked 17th in all of baseball in hard hit rate percentage at 50.8, he was happened to be right behind Addison Barger and right in front of Vlad Jr., which is very interesting that three Blue Jays are all there. He changed his launch angle last year a bit, and he hit less infield pop-ups, which is very interesting. If he can keep that trend going, I can see a very good bargain. I can see his home run total being similar to what he had last year, if not a little bit more.
So this is a player that I think it's a difference of me between a draft and an auction. In a draft, he's going in the 11th round, and there's just so many more quantities that I need to and want to take in the 11th round. He's not a top catcher. He's not a second-round catcher. I just don't have a need for him in a draft to do that. I think there's going to be more bargains with other positions at that time. In an auction, though, where it's about the dollar, I can see myself taking more. He's only a $2 bargain. I think he's been inconsistent over the past couple of years. That second half, that definitely was an issue with the slump. We've seen it in catchers. It's hard for me to really give credence. I'm not uncomfortable taking him, right? If his price slips quite a bit more, I'd be okay with it. I'm okay with the player, but I'm not in love with the value you need to take him. And he has been in the World Series last year, so maybe somebody pushes him up for that reason. Again, it's more for me the not enough of a consistent bankable track. Like I read you the numbers for Will Smith. I mean, his numbers over the last 4 years: $16, $1, $14. To draft him with a lot of draft capital as my number one catcher is a little bit tough for me. Next one, Ryan Jeffers. Very interesting. He's been consistent. He's been about a $9 player over the last couple of years. I have him projected at $7. He's going for just $3 in the 18th round. So he's just a little bit of a couple of bucks to get him will get you a better catcher. He's been really consistent. I mean, I have him projected for 15 homers, a 240 average, like around 50 to 60 RBIs. He's only 28 years old, so he hasn't even reached he possibly has not reached his prime yet. Again, I don't think he's the number one catcher. I think he's a high-end number 2, but for the price, you can spend a middle to low-end number in terms of auction dollars or draft capital to get him, and he's actually at the top of the second-round pile, and he's actually consistent. So I'm actually a fan of Ryan Jeffers. I think that he could be on my roster. Ron?
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of his too, and I think his price is depressed because of drop from 21 homers in 2024 to 9 last year. But I mean, last year he had a hand injury in June that didn't merit an IL stint, but probably had an influence on his numbers, and he had concussion in September. So I think that depressed his numbers a little bit, but I think he is closer to that 21 home run hitter than the 9 home run hitter we had last year. So yeah, I definitely think a bargain.
Okay,
And
agreed.
add on to the fact that his home run to fly ball rate last year was 7%. So that may go along with the injury that he had. There's no other catcher in Minnesota. He actually DH'd 29 times last year because he plays in Minnesota and they don't have a deep lineup. So that's a little bit detriment to him that he's going to get the playing time, but that lineup isn't that great. He usually bats in the middle of the lineup also. So there are very few catchers that actually bat in the middle lineup like that. So, if you want a good number 2 catcher, he fits the bill.
Best contact rate of his career, over 80%. Best walk rate of his career at 11%. So he's trending with the underlying skill set in the right direction. So I'm positive about Jeffers. And finally, on my list here is Bo Naylor. I got him with $1, Ron, at the XFL draft. I was trying to get Harry Ford, but he went for like $8, and I was sort of, what? So I grabbed Bo Naylor with $1, and I'm pretty proud of that one. I don't have him ranked as the 30th catcher. I have him like around the 22nd. So again, that flat approach at the bottom, just an extra $1. In my case, I got him for free, essentially. Got me bumped up about 8 spots in the catcher. He's been consistent. The last couple of years of homers, 11, 13, 14. We know he's got pedigree. I think he can hit maybe 20, maybe even 25 homers if you squint hard enough. The issue with him is the batting average, but, he had a 222 BABIP last year. His strikeout rate is coming down. His walk rate is, again, above 11%. So he's got skill sets sort of like Ryan Jeffers, to be honest, and he's even cheaper. He's essentially free. So Bo Naylor, to me, is a good low option that I think you can bank on. You agree, Ron?
Oh, I don't know about banking on him, but yeah, I mean, he's definitely a low option. And I just want to remind you that the XFL is an OBP league, so he's not so good in that context. But yeah, I worry about that batting average. I mean, from expected batting average last year was about maybe 30 points higher than he actually batted, so that's a little bit of a positive outlook. But I think he hits way too many fly balls, which he doesn't have that much power, and a lot of them are caught. Um, yeah, I don't know. I really don't see it with Bo Naylor, no.
The thing is, though, he's almost free, so that if he doesn't look like he's going for that 20 to 25 homer trajectory, you can cut him and try a different option because you didn't pay anything at the draft. So to me, he's got one of the better upside plays at the bottom of the cost scale. So that's what I look for. But yeah, the batting average does scare me, and yeah, actually the OBP, if you given that XFL is OBP, you're right. That's a problem also.
Yeah, yeah, 400 at bats at a 200 batting average can be a real killer.
But if you're playing at the bottom of the pool here for the catchers, it's not the worst thing in the world. You know he's the only catcher there, he gets most of the playing time in Cleveland. So he played 100 about he'll play about 120 games, which is great. But the problem is he also hits the ball on the ground a lot. He was tied for eighth in grounded into double plays last year, which is actually kind of high. By the way, do you know who the number one person was in grounding into double plays last year overall in baseball?
No,
Junior Caminero, which is very
really?
interesting. Yes, he was
Huh.
number one. And number two is Pete Alonso. So at least he's off the Mets, so that's a good thing, right? Yeah. So, but if you're playing at the bottom of the pool, I mean, there are worse options out there than Bo Naylor, and if you can get him for a buck, yeah, sure, you can go ahead.
Right. Again, I like Ryan Jeffers much better than Bo Naylor, and he's not going to cost you that much. Again, it's about knowing the player pool and the flat nature of it. Just be aware that catcher, it's worth it to spend that extra one or two, or to go. Don't wait till the last round in a two catcher league. I will say though, we're talking about two catcher leagues. If you are playing in a one catcher league, to me the strategy, and you can agree or disagree, Ron, is just spend $1 with your last pick. It's not worth actually spending any money on catcher whatsoever. Just if you're in a 12-team one catcher league, just get the 12th catcher for $1 with your last pick and be done with it. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, if you take a look at in the 15-team league, the 15th best catchers like Gabriel Moreno or Francisco Alvarez. I mean, that's, absolutely.
All right, Ruvain, injury report, first of the year, and it's been an off season, so I'm sure you've got what to say.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about catchers today. So I'm going to start with William Contreras. In November, he underwent a minor procedure for a fracture on his left middle finger. He's expected to be ready for spring training, so no worries about that. Connor Wong, another catcher who should be on your radar for a possible second catcher out in Boston there. He underwent successful right hand carpal boss excision procedure, which is actually where they take out a part of the bone. He had it back in October. He should be good to start the season. But it's also his catching mate, Carlos Narvaez, had knee surgery also done over the offseason. They're both expected to be okay to start the season, but that's just something to watch out for. Sean Murphy, Atlanta President Baseball Operation Alex Anthopoulos, said that the team will have a better idea by January as to how far Murphy is in his rehab. He had surgery to repair a right labral tear in his hip, which means he's not fully better. Which, if you're looking at catchers, I don't think you should have Sean Murphy as your number two. And I'll end with the Mets. Francisco Alvarez, he did have surgery over in the offseason to repair a torn UCL in his right thumb. He played through it. He tried during the end of the regular season. He should be ready to go when the season starts.
By the way, the Dodgers deal, $240 million for 4 years, $60 a year.
Oh my God.
Holy cow. I don't know about any opt-outs. We'll find that out
That's
as
crazy.
we go, although by the time you're listening to it, you might have more detail. But
That's
we are stunned
crazy.
here on Beat the Shift as Tucker gets $60 million a year for 4 years. Good Lord.
We are all in the wrong profession, I'll tell you that.
Wow.
And Jeff Passan tweeted it first.
Yeah.
All right, Ron,
Yeah,
this
true.
was a fantastic episode. We did catchers, but we had a great discussion on risk and everything. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. It's a tremendous honor to have you. It really is. So thank you for coming.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I really appreciate being on, guys. It's always fun being on your podcast. Thanks.
All right, you can just tell the audience, where we can see your stuff, get your book again, and all things Ron Shandler.
Yeah, well, RonShandler.com is my home base, but all the Babs material is on BaseballHQ.com. I'll be writing a few columns, and the database will be up in a week or so. And my book is on Amazon, BookBaby.com. That's Fantasy Reconstructed, the Innovator's Playbook for Fantasy Sports.
All right, Ruvain, what about you? What's going on?
You can follow me on Twitter X at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates as they come, and they're going to start to be coming in the next couple of weeks as pitchers and catchers will start reporting soon. You can also catch my writing over at Rotoballer.
All right, and I'm Ariel Cohen on Twitter, X at ATCNY. You can see my stuff at Fangraphs and at Rotoballer. The ATC projections will be up next week. We're going to be once again on Fangraphs, on RotoWire, Yahoo Sports, Rotoballer. A lot of different sites. We're all getting ready to go. It's been a lot of work, and we'll culminate next week. I think Thursday will be ATC Day 2026. Looking forward to that. All right. Once again, thank you so much for Ron Shandler for coming on the show today. Great to be back, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.